Well, we actually do have about half of our group already, so I'm going to go ahead and start my intro so that I can hand it over to Alan. Thank you for joining us for today's SBDC webinar with Alan Singleton of Singleton Law Firm. Just a few quick things before we get started. You are welcome to ask questions. We just ask that you submit those via the chat box, and then we will cover them throughout the presentation if feasible, and if not, we'll get them covered before we close out today's session. You will receive a follow-up email tomorrow morning, and that will include a recording of today's session, so if you want to go back and revisit anything Alan says, you can. And then just a quick note, if you are here as a part of the City of Champaign grant program, please send me a quick email afterwards to let me know that you were here and that you participated in today's session. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Alan and we can get started.
Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate the opportunity to visit this afternoon, and I'm going to try to imagine a group of individuals sitting around a conference room. I can imagine 2 or 3 sort of up and going businesses, names I might recognize. I don't know who's out there, but 2 or 3 of those. I might imagine an individual from another SBDC or another community wanting to hear some perspectives. And I can imagine a couple of people who might be interested in the topic in general and wanting to kind of put some thought into it early on. And so I'll try to share some perspectives about sort of planning ahead and planning for succession in your business, whether that's at a time when you are not ready to exit, but just want to have a backup plan, or as you are nearing the time of a possible needed transition due to age or some other event that might happen. So that'll be kind of my perspective today. I'll try to share some general perspectives and things to think about. And we'll touch on a few tools as well, but I'll try not to get too overwhelmed by the legalese and try to keep a big picture. So next slide. Every big business owner will exit by choice or circumstance. If you do some planning ahead, you get an opportunity to have some input into protecting what you built, whether that's clients, customers who follow you, providing for your employees, leaving a legacy to your family members or others, realizing some monetary funds at the end to help a charity or whatever comes your way or is relevant to your situation. It's planning ahead. It helps avoid a fire sale outcome and a legal mess and losing value. Gives you some flexibility, peace of mind, and a path forward. Next step. Here's some key goals to think about in succession planning. There's leadership and ownership, who's leading the business and who the owner is. Providing for financial security for the exiting owner, continuity of service to clients and customers, preservation or transfer of wealth to the next generation. And there are tax things that come into play, estate and gift tax and things of that nature if the business gets larger in size. And then fulfillment of family, employee, or legacy goals. What are your goals for when you're done enjoying the time of running the business and moving that on to the next stage for the business? Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Timing. Is it ever too early to start planning? My dad always had a 3x5 note card. He went to the University of Illinois in the 1960s, and there was a sticker or something that he picked up there that the engineers liked, and it said plan ahead. And on the 3x5 note card, there wasn't quite enough room to write the D. So somebody wrote the letters too large and the D had to go on the next line. So it's never too early to think about the transition of the business. Ideally, years before you want to exit. It allows for flexibility and strategic positioning. If you think about making some decision in terms of branding or a market to enter into, or how to structure the business in general, that's something to think about as you run the business and enjoy that process of running the business throughout your lifetime or whatever period of time you wish to engage in that business. Um, Now, when the transition might take effect, can happen at a number of different points in time. It can occur gradually over time. So you bring the next generation of the family in, they sort of work their way up. Maybe they work on the line. If it's a manufacturing facility, perhaps they actually start out working on the line in high school. They get a feel for what it means to be out on the line, working, doing the task at hand that's doing the manufacturing. Perhaps they go out and even, have some experience in another setting before they come back. And then gradually over time, sometimes you work those family members in and they, as they prove themselves and trust grows, then there's a gradual transition. Other times, if it's a service business, you introduce the younger or the newer folks to clients over time and allow that to occur in that fashion. Sometimes it's a triggered event. There's a need to retire, disability, or maybe you've hit a milestone. For the company, you've hit something that means that, wow, we've hit a plateau, and in order to grow, we have to do something that is totally and completely different and beyond the risk profile that we're comfortable doing. And so it's time to have an exit at that point. Sometimes you leave it open and you say, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I don't want to make any changes right now. But here it is. If I pass or become incapacitated, then you're the heir, you're the one who takes over. And other times it's opportunistic. Now, if it's and I put that in, when opportunity knocks, it's nice to be prepared to answer that call. And if you do a little bit of planning ahead of time and keep your ducks in a row and pay attention, then you'll be in a position to walk through those opportunities as they present themselves. Next. Here's some key factors: size and complexity of the business. The bigger and more complex, the more thought needs to be put into it sometimes. Are there any special licenses, qualifications, or certifications? Minority disadvantaged business owner status is something that pops up from time to time. And certainly that affects who can be the next owner. A license to practice dentistry, for example, is a big issue. Used to, it would have been, if it was a dental practice, the license to practice dentistry or veterinary medicine is a big hurdle. But my vet just sold to an MBA. and that individual, or actually an accountant, a CPA, and that CPA employs veterinarians now and owns and runs the business. So the licensure issue in that case is certainly an issue, but can be worked around. Sometimes there are key contracts or client relationships. If those client relationships or contracts can't get passed on, then that could certainly be a concern and a way to preserve value and something to be looked at. And then strength and depth of the leadership bench. If you have a deep leadership, if you phase out, it could be that the rest of the leaders can continue to operate the business, and you'll just move on and realize whatever buyout you're going to buy out and realize, and you're kind of removed from the group, but there's other people to carry the ball. That might happen in a larger law firm or something of that nature. Next item. Here's some legal tools that sometimes pop up. If you operate as a corporate entity, you'll typically have articles of incorporation, minutes, bylaws, and then a shareholder or buy-sell agreement. And sometimes that will have terms that will govern how you buy in or buy out of the corporate entity. If in fact you have more than one owner, buy-sell agreement wouldn't have much of an effect if you're the only owner, but in a situation where there are multiple owners and perhaps everybody owns say there are 10 owners and everybody owns a similar number of shares in the entity, or even disproportionate number of shares, the the buy-sell agreement can set forth some of the legal rights and terms for structuring the transaction. If it's a limited liability company, oftentimes it's an operating agreement that sort of fills the role of the shareholder buy-sell agreement. Certainly, estate planning documents such as wills and trusts come into play. There's actually a fair amount of overlap between the sort of business succession planning and interaction with the estate planning in general. So the estate planning in general would include not only the business, but also your other assets, and provide for other things such as guardians for any kids, and disposition of personal property and things of that nature. Depending on the size and complexity, the wills and trusts can be fairly complex. There are gifting strategies that can include the annual exclusion. You can give away, I believe it's $18,000 or $19,000 per year per spouse, without triggering any sort of gift or estate tax triggers. And then if the business is very, very large, or if there's a farm involved, sometimes you can do some special valuation tools, including minority interest discounts. So you get a valuation and give away things at a reduced value due to it being a minority interest, and also special use valuations such as under Internal Revenue Code 2032A. I'm not going to get into those details today, but those are just sort of some of the tools that the attorneys and planners might break out in order to help you effectuate whatever plan is arrived at. Next slide, please. The owner has a number of hats, depending on the size of the organization. You can be the owner, you can be the key employer, key employee, you can be the sole officer, president, vice president, secretary, treasurer. You can be the manager, and you can be, on the board of directors, or you can only be the owner and just an advisor on the side, and have already passed on management and control of the entity to, the next generation. So don't think of it, you don't have to think of the business succession planning and the transition phase as one fell swoop if it's to a transition to sort of friendly owners or family members. It can occur in stages, and you can take off one of your hats at a time. You don't have to take them all off at once if it's structured properly and if everybody's comfortable with it. Next slide. I think I just covered that. Let's see. The gradual changes provide for mentorship and buy-in. Buy-in in the sense that if somebody gets presented with an opportunity and they haven't had a chance to get up to speed, they may get it right. They may hit a home run the first time up at bat. Other times you may need to let them get used to things, get accustomed to the ebb and flow of the business. That's typically best. And increase authority for the next generation to take over, and keep them motivated. You got to pay them. I asked a contractor who was building a basement for me one time. He had his two sons out there working, and I said, "Hey, what's the key to keeping the family members working in the business?" And he kind of laughed, and either one or both of his sons were there too. He laughed great big. He says, "Well, you got to pay them really well." so he paid them, and they had a successful business, building basements, and they seemed to have a good working relationship. He was still the owner. I paid him well, and there was a process in place to allow them to take over at the right juncture. Next slide. Here's kind of a 3-generation success story. Family business pass on from founders to children to grandchildren. And they did it through sort of gradual buy-ins that happened over time. Each generation would start working in the business. And then the generation would gain trust as the older generation kind of got to the point where they were starting to wind down. They'd find a way to sort of allow the business profits to finance a buyout in a way that rewarded the older generation and provided for tax advantageous transfer in a way that met all the requirements. And but then the older generation still maintained a little bit of a voice and even some ownership until, until they passed. And it went through three generations like that, eventually sold to another business that is sort of like-minded, another family business, but very complementary and a strategic buyer. I consider that a huge success in terms of sort of a three-generation success and then an exit to a strategic buyer. Next slide. Here's some transitions in professional practices I've seen. Dental practice had a third-party facilitator, sort of a dental practice management individual came in, does a lot of help planning, kind of laid out the structure for the younger dentist to buy in. Younger dentist worked as a employee for a while, then bought in as a co-owner, and then bought the second half out. And it worked pretty well for the exiting doctor. I think it worked reasonably well for the entering doctor. But the patients ended up with a, the patients got used to the younger doctor and or dentist, and so basically the goodwill, the going concern value of the business was able to be passed on to the next individual. I already mentioned the vet practice that actually sold to an accountant. Yeah, that's the first one I'd seen of that. There's a thing called the corporate practice of medicine that in the past would not allow professional practices to be owned by non-professionals, but that's kind of getting eaten into a little bit over time. Yes, please feel free to chime in with any questions you might have at any point in time. If this were live in person, I would hopefully be fielding questions and reading everybody's facial expressions as we go. I know you might be checking emails now or, thinking about different things. I hope some of what I'm mentioning might resonate with you. I do want to say, kind of one thing is if you don't plan, you're going to let somebody else make your decisions. And so if you have the ability to plan ahead, it can be helpful in avoiding a lot of headaches. The success factors kind of in each of these were early involvement, a good buyer fit, and then seller support on the way out. Seller support on the way out provides for less diminution in value upon the transfer. And hopefully it's a strategic acquisition, so the new buyer will add value to the business. Next slide. Here's another case study, strategic acquisition of a Main Street business. The business had equipment, real estate, a loyal customer base. It was in part B2C, but sort of B2B to a large extent, business to business, a little bit of business to consumer, sold to another strategic buyer in the same town. So that was a nice exit and partial payment in cash, a lease that was very favorable to the seller. And then at a certain point, an option to buy the building later on the part of the buyer. The original brand name was retained at first and later folded into the buyer's brand. There was business continuity. The customers kept being served. The community wasn't, concerned about the transfer, and the transition happened smoothly. So a successful transaction on both sides. I will say that oftentimes I've seen exits where they don't stick. In particular, if a financial buyer comes in and buys a business, they realize that it's a lot of work to run it, and they're not quite sure how to run it. And sometimes the buyer ends up buying it back for pennies on the dollar for what they sold it. So that happens occasionally. Next slide. So sort of some key takeaways: start early, try to be transparent with successors, talk to them about what might happen. Successors in a larger family business need time, authority, some structure, expectation of how things are going to happen. So a lot of times the seller doesn't have to disappear, it can stay involved wisely. doesn't have to run things day to day, but is sort of a backstop on some of the decisions that might be made in the business. Sometimes external deal makers can help structure things. Certainly, an accountant, your in-house accountant, perhaps somebody outside the firm, your normal group, occasionally a third-party facilitator, and attorneys to help sort of paper things and be involved in the planning process can all add value to the situation. Preserving goodwill, the customer relationships, and the going concern value is preserving value and passing that on. It allows both the buyer and the seller to achieve optimum success. Next slide. Sort of a poor result. No plan in place, the owner becomes incapacitated or dies. No successor identified. Maybe even there's a negative value to the business. Key contracts and licenses lapse. Still costs money to wind it down. Your family has to clean it up. Maybe a fire sale for the business or just complete closure, and it takes some money to wind down a business. So that's kind of the opposite of what you would hope to see. Next slide. Kind of categorizing transitions by timing. Again, we talked about the gradual, phased handoff over time, triggered based upon an event like retirement or disability, contingent, if you die early or become incapacitated early, having somebody to step in, and opportunistic. And that's being prepared if the opportunity comes along, and planning ahead and getting your financials in order, having a clean capital structure, ownership structure, things organized so a buyer can understand what they're buying, all adds value so you can act upon an opportunity that comes along. And then if you are at a stage where you want to think about an exit, then you can put together, take additional steps beyond that, which it would include, if you're looking for a third-party buyer, talking with potential competitors, or just kind of get a feeling for who's wanting to expand, who would be a strategic buyer who might want to vertically integrate your business. Would it make sense for them to own that additional step in the value chain? And would they pay money for that? Or is there somebody else who just really wants to get in and run a business? Most banks won't lend money to buy, to start a business, but most banks will loan money to, at least a portion of the money, to buy an ongoing business that has revenues and is, can turn a profit. You'll still have to put in some of your own funds or something, but it's a lot easier to borrow money to buy a business than it is to borrow money to start a business, because it's got a proven business model. Next slide. All right, I'll pause right there and see what questions we have.
We do have a question, Alan, that came in. It says, what are best practices for making a contingent death or disability plan for your business that does not include familial succession? Simply put, how do you avoid a fire sale in this case?
One of the things that I haven't mentioned yet is some life insurance. And so you can either retain some capital in place to carry the business for a period of time, or you can have some key person insurance. And so if you think, well, I want to have, 6 months to, 3 months, 6 months, something of funds to provide liquidity upon a key person becoming disabled or passing, then, that life insurance can provide you that liquidity. Depending on the size of the business, there's also just relationships that you can have in place. So if it's a small accounting firm, and say the spouse of the accountant isn't going to take over the accounting firm, has no desire to, but there's an understanding with another accounting firm in town that would be probably complementary, that hey, it would make sense for the clients here to sort of transition over to you. You typically, in that sense, you might sell the practice, you might not, but there's this sort of a contingent succession plan or backup plan in place to handle those types of things. In general, sometimes there are key people at the business who would know that type of thing. So if there's a situation where the main owner isn't going to be able to do the work anymore, there's a plan for making sure the things got taken care of by somebody else, another firm who could take care of that, or another business who could take care of that. In that situation, you're probably not going to realize as high a value as you might in a different situation, but at least there's avoidance of a bad downside, I would say.
It's the only question we have so far. So I don't know if you want to keep going or we can wait a minute to see if any others come in.
Okay. See, I think there's two there, but I think one was yours.
Yep.
So, all right. We kind of pause for questions. Next slide, Liz. We'll talk just a little bit about some of the tax matters. $18,000 per recipient you can give away. That's the annual exclusion. Married couples can basically give away $36,000. So if you're trying to transition ownership to the next generation, that's something to think about, utilizing that the gifting each year, especially if it's a larger business. And then there are lifetime exemptions that are actually pretty high on the federal level, up to 13.6 per individual, 27 million per couple, and that's at the federal level. There's a sunset. It's supposed to end at January 1, 2026. Now, the state tax applies if you die and pass on the business, or you can do it during your lifetime. So it's a unified system, more or less, at the federal level. And right now, you've kind of got a window. So if you're done with the business, you want to gift it. I'm not saying gift $27 million worth of business to the next generation right now, but at least think about that, those numbers and what kind of plan you have in place. So it could be 2025 could be a strategic year to make large gifts. Who knows what will happen in the future? There are trust and valuation discounts, the section 2032A Internal Revenue Code section that I mentioned earlier. So there are a lot of tools that you can work with your estate planning and business succession counsel on to achieve some of those goals that you might have for larger businesses. If you're below that, then a lot of this probably isn't going to be an issue. But next slide. The state of Illinois has a lower amount, so $4 million per person. So there's no portability between spouses, meaning at the federal level, if one spouse passes away, then within a certain period of time, you can go back and claim the other spouse's ability to use that. You can't at the state of Illinois level. So if you got $4 million in assets or above, you might want to think about doing the planning before one of the spouses dies if you want to try to avoid Illinois estate tax. It's not as large a tax, but it is there and can be something to consider if you are at the stage to make a transition anyway. Estate planning attorneys work with AB trust, marital trust, bypass trust, or credit shelter trust. Those are all sort of synonyms for if one spouse passes away, the surviving spouse gets the ability to basically realize the value out of the portion that's going to bypass their estate, but it isn't taxed in the estate of the second spouse to die. And so that's very common estate planning tools. They became a little bit less utilized as the amounts grew higher. It used to be a lot lower on those amounts, but there still is the Illinois gift tax, the Illinois tax is lower, and who knows what's going to happen in the future. So next slide. Who can help in the process? I think it's got to start with the business owner. You need to be thinking about that. Key team members within the business, If you have key team members, an internal accountant or bookkeeper are important. Then you can engage professional advisors, CPA, tax attorney, business law attorney, estate planning attorney, and sometimes you engage a practice management consultant. And then outside market advisors, if you're trying to sell the business and you don't have a logical buyer, sometimes people engage a business broker. I would say that if the best sales I've worked on have not involved a business broker. I did have one work that involved a M&A advisory firm that was on a fairly large transaction, millions of dollars. And in that situation, the M&A advisory firm did help structure the deal. I felt that they were a value add. But if you don't have any buyers, the best buyers are the ones that logically come to mind and or sort of come to you organically, or you kind of know ahead of time who are the likely buyers are. And then lenders, meet with your banker. What if you have a regular banking relationship, update them on the business and say, hey, I'm 50 now, and I'm thinking about what the next stage is. You look at my financials. If you were on the other side of the deal, would you finance the deal? I've had a couple of transactions actually structured by the bank or informally because they saw an owner ready to exit. They had a long-term banking relationship and they knew somebody else who wanted to enter. And so they, with permission, kind of made an introduction. Next slide. Just some thoughts on how to choose a successor. If you're going to choose a successor within your family or within your current business employees, who has trust and leadership potential. Sometimes it's the smartest engineer in the group may not be the right CEO for the organization. Who understands the operation or can learn, who wants to do it. Some of the family members may not want to take over the business. It doesn't always happen. Certainly a lot of times it doesn't happen. Successor options include family members, key employees, an outside buyer, or a lot of times bringing in a junior owner and letting them work their way up as an associate, and then letting them take over at a certain point with appropriate financial considerations. Anybody coming in would like to have, some time, enough authority to get the job done, and then, participation in management. And of course, just like the guy who was digging my basement, he says, we got to pay him. Yeah, so he paid him well. Next step, or next slide. Here's some things to kind of keep in mind if you're thinking about selling your business. Clean financials. If you are buying new boats through your business, well, that's probably shouldn't be doing that anyway, but it also looks like your business isn't as profitable as it actually is, because you're buying boats that aren't related to your actual business, and that's hurting the profitability of the business. Getting a realistic valuation is sometimes helpful. I've had clients believe that their client or their business was worth $1 gazillion. I've had clients really have no clue what their business is worth. And sometimes getting an outside valuation from a third party can help. Ways to understand value, you can think of a reduction to present value of the future income stream. If somebody's going to buy your business, they expect to make some money on the business in the future. Excuse me. I'm going to pause right there and ask if there's any questions.
No problem. There are no questions right now, but we did have a couple people jump on after I had started and give my little spiel. So I do want to remind everyone, you can submit your questions in the chat box. Just use your Zoom toolbar to open that up, and then we'll make sure we get them addressed.
So valuation, we talked about reduction to present value of a future income stream. We talked about or another way to value is comparable sales. Think about how you would value a house in Cherry Hills. When all those houses were built new in a particular phase of Cherry Hills, maybe they were all within, $20,000 or $30,000 of each other. It's harder to do that with businesses because no two businesses are exactly the same. You can look at comparable sales through BizComps, done deals, some third-party databases, but it's hard to get exact comparables. Sometimes you look at publicly traded companies, but the size of those companies is so high that it's hard to really get a perfect feel for that. And I think one of the best cost to recreate is another one. How if I wanted to build this business, say it's a vertical integration, and the big company is saying I can build a factory to do this, or I can buy this one, and the day after I close it, I can integrate it into my business. So there's a time there, there's a cost, it's a going concern. All those are value adds. The best valuation is the one that comes in a form of a wire. We used to say a check, but a wire that hits your bank account is the best valuation. So yeah. So did I see a couple questions here?
Yeah, a few came in. The first one says business valuation is confusing to me. Any suggestions?
Yeah. Certainly. Again, it goes back to comparable sales, identical houses in a brand new neighborhood, or fairly identical. That's one way to think about it. It's hard to find comparables though. There are sort of rules of thumb that used to be used in the old days. I have a book of rules of thumb. An accounting firm would sell for 5 times revenue or whatever it is. Okay. Another is if you look at, say your business is going to make $500,000 over the next 10 years, then an individual who is good at math would reduce that $500,000 to the current present value. So if you're going to get $500,000 over the next 10 years, nobody would pay $500,000 for that now. Typically, they pay something less than that because they reduce it to present value. So that's another way. Another way to value it is if it's a strategic buyer, they may say, look, it's going to cost us $1 million to do this, and it's going to take 6 months. Why don't we just pay this business $1 million or maybe $1.25 million because we don't have to build it. We don't have to take the time to build it and buy their business. And there's sort of two types of buyers that look at these things. One is a financial buyer. They just look at the numbers and say, if I buy this, I think I can run it and make this much money. The second one is the one that I like, which is a strategic buyer. They look at what you're making right now, and they might say, well, okay, it's just standalone, it's worth $1 million, but because we have all these other things, really to us, it's worth $1.5 million because we can pay $1.5 million. We can integrate your business into the rest of our business, and then we can make an additional $6 or $7 million per year based upon that. And so that's my 1 + 1 = 3. I love that 1 + 1 = 3. You look for a strategic acquisition, a strategic buyer who can add your business into theirs and increase value over and above what the individual part of your business and their individual part of their business would on paper be, just looking at the numbers. And so those are some ways to value it. But again, the best valuation is the one that somebody is willing to write a check for or wire money to you for. And so if you have your ducks in a row and you're ready at any point in time, then that allows you to achieve the optimum return. Now, if you're on the other side, the buyer side, we'll kind of look, we would think about some other things, including risk management and a whole bunch of other things. But the issues we're talking about are relevant, but you may have a little bit different perspective on each of the topics. I hope that And if there are more questions, my email, I believe, is in here, and my phone number, and people are welcome to give me a call or drop me an email, and I'll be happy to chat more offline. Sometimes not knowing the nature of the business and things of that nature, it's a little hard. But are there other questions right now, Jordan?
Yeah, you do have one more actually. As of now, it says, how do you value intangibles like brand, growth trajectory, social media following, etc.?
Yeah, so that is the going concern or goodwill of the business. And certainly um, the the hard assets are any real estate. And I just closed the deal. There's an IRS form that categorizes everything. If it's an asset sale, you have to put it all in 6 different categories. I think it's form 8332. That may be the wrong form, but something like that. And you've got the real estate, you've got equipment that could be your manufacturing equipment, or you've got inventory. Maybe you have prepared product ready for sale. And then you have your going concern in the sense of you have employees, you have the facility. It's opening every day and sending out product or delivering service. And then there's sort of the branding and the customer relationships and the social media presence and all of that. And that's sort of the intangibles. And each of those get taxed a little bit differently. So as you sit down and think about planning and putting things in each of those categories, if it's an asset sale, certainly there's some thought to be put into that. And I would say that if you have all those things in line, sometimes that's the only thing you have. Hopefully not, but a lot of times that's a significant portion of your business. And it just kind of depends on the business and what's being sold. I would say I've worked in some businesses where, these are more tech oriented, and this was earlier, I haven't seen it quite as much, but when social media was a booming thing, everybody would, start a business, try to get so many faces on their social media platform. They wouldn't be making any money, but all those followers, all those faces, all those members of that organization were something they could sell to another larger social media organization who would then monetize them. So I've seen a little bit less of that recently than I did earlier. But what other questions do we have?
We do have one right now. It says, we have a trust. Do they seem to work? Oh, hold on. Sorry. Move down. We have a trust. Do they seem to work successfully? Should the succession planning be more specific within it?
Um, yeah, certainly a trust is sort of, there are a couple of hats to wear here, and it's sometimes the same attorney wears the estate planning hat and business attorney hat. Other times it's different attorneys. But if you do have different attorneys or different advisors for each of them, those 2 groups of advisors need to talk to each other because you don't, or you need to coordinate with those aspects, because you don't want to have a situation where, the buy-sell agreement or the shareholder agreement is in conflict with trust, and the understanding of all the business, everybody at the business is it's going to be one way on the estate planning documents or the trust say something totally different. Some of the top mistakes I see is people prepare a trust, in particular, maybe a living trust or a revocable trust. That's something you can revoke during your lifetime, but they forget to put anything in it, or maybe they just put a few things. And so they haven't put the stock of the business in there. They haven't put the real estate in there. They haven't, handled the beneficiary designations on 401ks or life insurance policies in a way that makes sense. So a lot of times with the estate wills and estate planning documents, everything gets prepared, signed, executed, but then people forget to put the assets where they're supposed to be, or they just didn't ever get around to it, or they acquire some new assets, and maybe, they buy another piece of property and they say, well, how am I taking title? Well, I'll just put in my own name for right now. And then it never gets put in the right spot. So making sure all of those work together in a logical fashion, I would say, is the most important thing. to not leave out in the problem that I see pop up most often. Yeah.
Well, we're all caught up on questions for now as well.
Okay. Um, yeah, I guess, I'll go back to kind of a final thought, just try to, operate your business every day in a way that, if you can, in a way that, you could, if somebody walked in the door and says, I want to give you $1 million for it, if that's a good price, you could say, okay, great, here's our financials. Here's the deal, but I want 1.5 and we can close tomorrow, and that now that's hard to do, but to the extent you can try to do that, and then to the extent you can be ready to act, that's good. One thing I really haven't mentioned is what I will call the graceful wind down too. And that happens quite often. Maybe it's a business that is really kind of yours, and you're going to phase it down or wind it down in a graceful fashion. You just gradually wind it down over time. Maybe you still have a way to handle if you pass away early, but you just kind of wind it down over time. Do the things you want to do. Hey, I'm not having fun with that line of business. I think I would have to buy a new piece of machinery there. I don't think I'll do that. I'll keep doing this other thing, and just kind of gradually wind it down over time in a way that makes sense. And sometimes that's just as well to, if it would be taken over by somebody who maybe would not run it well, and you wouldn't want to see, it in the wrong hands or something. That can certainly be a graceful transition plan over time as well. So it doesn't have to be an exit. It can be a planned, wind down, and that was fun. And, somebody else can do their laundry at another laundromat or whatever. So, all right. Well, thank you for the opportunity to visit today. As Jordan said, please don't feel free to reach out if you have any follow-up questions.
Thank you so much, Alan, and thank you to everyone who joined us today. Again, you will receive a follow-up email, so if you want to revisit any of that, or you may have missed the very beginning or something like that, you will receive a link to the recording so you can go back and do it. So we don't have any other questions in the chat, so we can go ahead and close out today's session. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and thank you, Alan and Liz, for being here.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.